The moment that sticks in my head like a thorn under the nail? It wasn't the gala, or the champagne, or even that smug little text that would eventually set the whole circus on fire. It was 3 weeks earlier in the break room when Derek, with that greased-up frat boy grin, told the new hire, Sloan, she's kind of like legacy code. Can't delete her outright, but we're working on the update. He chuckled. I didn't. I just stirred my burnt coffee and pretended not to hear. I'd heard worse. I'd survived worse. But that day something turned. I'd been at Halcyon Systems for 12 years. Not coasting with seniority 12, no. I built our innovation division from a glorified broom closet in the annex to a 60-person powerhouse with 3 patents pending and 5 major clients. I'd done it without demanding glory, without throwing elbows. While Derek and his ilk were busy ordering custom leather notebooks with their initials embossed in gold, I was mentoring interns, debugging prototypes at 2 a.m., and taking phone calls from vendors on my kid's birthday. And somehow I was still the invisible one. Look, if you're still listening at this point, and not Derek, because I know he rage Googles me now, do me a quick favor. Hit the like. Maybe even subscribe. I know every YouTuber and their grandma says it, but our little team behind this channel reads every comment, every click, and it fuels us harder than Derek's ego in a mirror. Thanks. Now back to the dumpster fire. See, here's the thing they never tell you when you make it to the VP table as a woman who didn't go to Stanford, doesn't golf, and dares to wear flats. You're allowed in the room, but no one hears you unless you're echoing someone else. I watched junior execs, mostly men, mostly loud, mostly useless, get showered in praise for quoting strategies I had outlined in dusty Google Docs a year ago. I saw them rebrand my efficiency model as the Derek method on a slide deck. I sat through meetings where I wasn't just ignored, I was erased. Still, I stayed. Loyalty? Sure. Fear? Probably. But also because I had built something real, and I wasn't about to let some portfolio-padding nepotism prince undo it without a fight. Besides, someone had to run the place while the thought leaders were busy doing TED Talk karaoke at conferences. The real kicker? I knew they were grooming Derek to replace me before HR even got their ducks in a row. The signs were there. My budget approvals started getting lost. I was suddenly asked to send pre-reads and post-reads and summary emails to ensure alignment. My one-on-ones with the CTO were quietly canceled. One by one, no explanations. My team was being poached, repackaged, and presented as a new vision under Derek's glittering charm and plagiarized jargon. And I stupidly, stubbornly, still tried to play it straight. I dotted my I's. I smiled at the board luncheons. I even ordered extra team mugs with the new branding just to keep morale up. Because I thought maybe, just maybe, substance would win out over smoke. But the longer I played nice, the more I felt it, this slow, quiet drowning. Like they were piling sandbags on my shoulders, one strategic realignment at a time. Until that day in the break room. That day, I stopped being loyal. I stopped playing fair. I started taking notes, because if I was going down, I sure as hell wasn't going quietly. Derek showed up on a Tuesday like a human LinkedIn post brought to life. Tan blazer, no socks, some overpriced loafers that looked allergic to work. He introduced himself at the staff meeting with a laugh that said, I've never been told no, and PowerPoint slides with more gradients than substance. Think of me as a catalyst, he said, like that was a compliment and not a warning flare. I'm here to unlock the latent power of Halcyon's most underleveraged assets. Spoiler, that was me. I was the underleveraged asset. Within 48 hours, he'd parked himself in my war room, the one with 12 years of post-its, prototypes, and pizza boxes I'd called the Innovation Cave. He slapped his laptop on my table and said, let's co-lead the Q3 tech initiative. The board wants a tighter feedback loop. Translation, I'm taking your project. You're gonna smile while I do it. No one questioned it, not out loud, because Derek had the golden pedigree, MBA from somewhere that rhymed with Yale. A stint at a startup that got acquired purely for its mailing list. Most importantly, he married the daughter of John Everstone, who just so happened to be the loudest voice on our board. No conflict of interest there, right? The slide deck I'd been refining for 6 months, every schematic, every diagram, every client insight I'd spent weekends developing, started showing up in Derek's weekly alignment briefs, just with different fonts and a lot more white space. When I pointed it out to my boss, she shrugged. It's just branding. He's a big picture guy, sure, and I'm the janitor apparently. He started changing names on the project folders. Just to streamline ownership, he said, fingers tapping like a drum solo on Red Bull. My name was gone by Friday. By Monday, he was holding stakeholder syncs without inviting me. One of my junior engineers texted me, confused, are we supposed to be reporting to Derek now? I replied with a thumbs up and then deleted the message, because now I was documenting everything. Not just the overt power grabs, the little things, his meeting times, his version numbers, the way his summaries copied entire phrases from my archived emails, every misspelled acronym, every bloated buzzword. I had a spreadsheet titled For When It Burns, and make no mistake, I knew it would burn. It got worse before it got ridiculous. He started hosting innovation huddles at 8 a.m. on Wednesdays, mandatory for my team, kind where everyone stands around while he ideates in a word cloud of nonsense. One week it was decentralized synergy matrices. Another, frictionless ideation scaffolds. I swear he opened a Miro board and just typed Synergy 12 times in different colors. Meanwhile, my actual work, the prototype that worked, the client feedback that mattered, the engineers who built things, was being ignored, redirected, repackaged as his streamlined vertical. I even saw my own whiteboard mock-up in one of his investor decks, right down to the typo on optimization. He left it in like a watermark. But here's the part that really lit the fuse. He booked a dinner with one of my longtime clients solo, said it was a reconnection dinner. I only found out because the client CC'd me on a follow-up and asked if I'd approved the new pricing model Derek suggested. I hadn't. It was wrong. It was reckless. Reeked of someone trying to impress the board with revenue projections based on hallucinations and hubris. I smiled, replied politely, corrected the figures, and then I opened a new folder on my desktop, Exit Strategy, because if Derek thought I was legacy code, he hadn't read the fine print. I was the source, and I had backups. They say betrayal feels like a stab in the back. Wrong. That would imply you didn't see it coming. Mine felt more like slow strangulation, soft hands tightening behind a velvet curtain. No alarms, no screaming, just silence where my voice used to be. I first realized I'd been ghosted, corporate edition, when the calendar stopped pinging. The Monday product sync, gone. The Q3 strategy sprint, vanished. The bi-weekly with the CTO, canceled for bandwidth, allegedly. I scrolled through the shared invites. Every single one now listed Derek as owner. My name, absent, erased, like someone had just hit backspace hard enough to rewrite history. At first, I told myself it was an oversight, a clerical hiccup. Maybe Gina in ops got wires crossed. But then my favorite engineer, Rachel, one of the few bright lights in this fluorescent hellscape, messaged me privately. Are you not on the Wednesday roadmap call anymore? Derek just demoed your prototype. My prototype. The one I'd stayed up 3 nights building. The one I tested so hard I fried the logic board and had to cannibalize a demo unit just to reboot it. The one I'd named Project Kestrel, a nod to the bird my daughter loved. The one we watched dive bomb crows in the park. Apparently now it was called Derek's flagship alpha. And apparently I no longer existed. But the tipping point? That came wrapped in a red lanyard and a smug Instagram story. Halcyon had sent Derek to San Diego for the annual Future Tech Forum, the biggest damn industry conference we attend all year. Normally, I'm the one they send. Not because I beg for it, but because I know the damn product. I've spoken on that stage 3 years in a row. I've shaken hands with the CEOs who matter. But this year, I saw it secondhand in a story someone forwarded me. Derek on stage, grinning like he'd just cured cancer with a recycled TED talk. Behind him, my UI, my architecture, my flow charts, they didn't even change the fonts. And still, no mention of me. Not in his slides, not in his speech, not in the caption. Presenting Halcyon's breakthrough initiative powered by next-gen strategy. He even added a rocket emoji. A goddamn rocket emoji. I slammed my laptop shut and stared at the beige wall of my office until it blurred into static. Not out of sadness. Not anymore. That had come earlier, back when I still believed in fairness or credit or karma. No, this was different. This was surgical clarity. That's when I got the knock. It was Elliot, a data lead from marketing who'd been around long enough to know where the skeletons were buried and who had the shovels. He closed the door behind him and muttered, "You didn't hear this from me, but Derek's been talking to HR. Words like redundant and legacy transition plan are being tossed around. He's planning a restructure. End of Q3, I stared at him. After he finishes demoing my prototype, you mean? Elliot just nodded, looks that way. I didn't flinch, I didn't curse. I didn't throw my chair, even though it suddenly seemed like a deeply reasonable thing to do. Instead, I opened my drawer, pulled out the slim USB stick I kept for emergencies and copied everything. Architecture diagrams, client emails, proof of authorship, early sketches with my annotations, even the pitch video I made at 2 a.m. with my dog snoring in the background, proof this was mine. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I made a list. People I trusted. People I could build with. People who saw me before Derek's halo blinded the board. And I started calling. Not loud, not obvious. But one by one, I began stitching something new from the threads he tried to unravel. Because if Derek wanted a legacy transition, he was damn well going to get one. Just not the version he expected. At 1:17 a.m., somewhere between the 5th espresso and the 12th version of the pitch deck, I felt it, that old hum in the spine I hadn't heard in years. The one that used to show up back when I still believed in possibility. Not promotion, not politics, possibility. My living room had turned into a war bunker. Blueprints, user flow sketches, and investor psychographics littered the floor like corporate shrapnel. My dog, Brisket, looked concerned. I hadn't taken him on a proper walk in 2 days, but I wasn't spiraling, I was building. Again, only this time I wasn't building for company. I was building out of one. I named it Project Threshold. Quietly, privately, it felt like a dare. I took the bones of what Derek had stolen and stripped the bloat he'd added. Pulled out the parts that worked, the pieces that could scale, and welded them into something sleeker. Something that didn't just respond to a problem, it anticipated it. No more leveraging synergies or streamlining verticals. This was utility, function, precision. My original architecture, but cut loose from Halcyon's bureaucratic fat and marketing glitter. The first NDAs I sent out were short, 2 pages to the point. No frills, just like the prototype. I started with Tasha, my old mentor from my MIT days, now deep in the venture trenches. Then Lisa, the COO who once told me in the hotel bar at Tech Women's Summit, "You ever go solo? I want to see it before Sequoia does," they answered. Quick, curious. But the big swing? Martin Cleary. Martin had always been a unicorn wrapped in corduroy, an investor who actually read technical specs, not just market summaries. He didn't chase hype, he chased builders. Years ago, when my division was still scraping together beta tests, he'd stop by unannounced and ask me, "You ever think about starting something real?" Back then, I said no. Back then, I thought loyalty mattered. Now I knew better. I didn't pitch him directly. That would have raised alarms. Instead, I sent a ping to his assistant, Claudia, just to hope you're well, with a quiet link to a sandbox environment. No company name, no branding, just access. 12 hours later, I got a reply. "Martin wants to talk." Meanwhile, I kept my halcyon face polished. I smiled in the halls. I showed up to team huddles. I nodded through Derek's nonsense like a bobblehead wired for pain. Let him think I was winding down. Let him believe he was breaking me down into parts for salvage. Because beneath the surface, I was recruiting 3 engineers who'd already been reallocated by Derek, bitter but brilliant. 1 UI lead who'd quit last year, tired of our glass ceiling disguised as a skylight. A cloud security architect from a partner firm who owed me a favor. A big one. We met in coffee shops, on encrypted calls. One time, in a bowling alley during league night, because nothing says stealth like standing between 2 guys named Carl arguing about wrist angles. Every meeting ended the same way, with a soft laugh, a raised brow, and a quiet, "You in?" They all were. I wasn't just leaving Halcyon, I was extracting its soul. The more Derek paraded around with his borrowed slides and AI-generated jargon, the more oxygen I had to build freely in his shadow. He was so busy polishing his fraudulence. He didn't see me turning the lights out behind him. Each night I worked felt like reclaiming something they tried to take. Each line of code typed without his oversight felt like breathing again. I wasn't tired anymore. I was electric, ready, and most dangerous of all, I was done waiting for permission. The gala loomed like a guillotine wrapped in satin napkins and fake smiles. Derek was practically vibrating with anticipation, gliding through the office like some botoxed prophet, talking about legacy transitions and the vision we'll unveil at the gala. He held court in the break room, name-dropping journalists who'd confirmed their attendance and casually mentioning he'd hired a freelance videographer to capture the moment for his professional reel. Professional reel. Like this was his damn wedding. I kept my smile glued on and my resignation letter saved in drafts. I didn't need to send it, not yet, because I wasn't going to walk. I was going to detonate. At all hands, Derek unveiled the new gala theme, Forging Forward, Halcyon's Next Evolution. It had the hollow clang of a middle manager trying to sound epic. He clicked through slides packed with my work, each stripped of its context like organs harvested for transplant. In one, I spotted the original wireframe from my prototype. He'd slapped a new name on it, Project Torchlight, and called it our most visionary initiative to date. I fought the urge to laugh out loud. Torchlight? The man couldn't debug a sandwich. My team glanced at me during the meeting. I offered them a shrug, nothing performative, just enough to say, let him have his pageantry. He won't own the ending. Back in my office, I shut the door, pulled up my inbox, and reread the note from Claudia, Martin Cleary's assistant. Martin will be attending the gala, bringing 2 associates who would love to hear more about what you showed him. No fanfare, just that, but I felt the gravity shift. The tightrope was shortening. Martin didn't show up unless he wanted to see something, not hear about it, not speculate, see it. The next 3 days were a blur of polish and preparation. I wasn't fixing the pitch, it was airtight, but I needed the moment to land. Because if you're going to go out, you don't tiptoe, you tear the damn rug out. I dug through old files and pulled the original documentation. Timestamped drafts, archived emails, devlogs with my name etched into the metadata. Just in case Derek tried to claim collaborative authorship once the fallout began, there'd be no ambiguity, no wiggle room. I slipped it all onto a backup drive, encrypted and stashed in my clutch. Just another accessory. Just another night, the day of the gala. I sat in the hotel suite Halcyon had booked for us and watched Derek pose for pre-event photos in front of the branded step and repeat like he was accepting an Oscar. His suit probably cost more than my rent. I wondered briefly if he knew what night it was. Really knew, because I did. The media was here, the investors, the board. The next big thing was about to be presented. All eyes were on him, and yet, all I felt was stillness. Calm. Kind of quiet that comes before a storm, or right after you cut the wire and wait to see if the bomb ticks down or goes dark. I looked in the mirror and fixed a strand of hair. My dress, a deep navy column, no frills, looked exactly like something you'd wear to an execution. Which frankly it was. One last check of my phone. Claudia had messaged again, "We'll be seated near the stage." Perfect. I slid the drive into my clutch, picked up my wine-red lipstick, and painted on a smile sharp enough to slice tendons. Tonight wasn't for survival. Tonight was for reclamation. Derek had spent months stealing the stage. I was about to set it on fire. The ballroom was all glitter and pretense. Chandeliers clung to the ceiling like desperate debutantes, casting golden light over a crowd of clinking glasses and forced laughter. A jazz quartet played something vaguely expensive near the Rosado station, and everywhere I turned, one was toasting to a new era. Derek worked the room like a politician in heat. I watched him air kiss a board member's wife, slap backs with two VCs I'd introduced to the company years ago, and toss out phrases like disruptive scalability with the reckless abandon of a man who'd never written a single line of code in his life. He spotted me near the bar and zeroed in, grinning like he was about to offer me a timeshare. "Sloan," he drawled, straightening his cufflinks in that way guys do when they're about to drop something shitty disguised as professional. "Can you believe this turnout? I mean, just imagine if you'd been able to scale Torchlight this well back when it was yours." I smiled with my teeth, not my eyes. Hard to scale something when half your funding's being siphoned into yacht lunches and branded hashtags. He laughed, but it faltered just a hair too quickly. He leaned in, voice low and performatively sympathetic. "Look, I know this year's been transitional, but we're all team players, right? Let's just make tonight about celebration. One last dance, so to speak. One last dance." He walked away before I could reply, already floating toward another donor with a handshake locked and loaded. I downed my champagne in one long, silent swallow. Dinner was sea base with a saffron reduction and betrayal in the air. At the time the waiter placed the dessert menus on the table, some ironic deconstructed tiramisu, I knew it was coming. And sure enough, it did. My phone buzzed. "Derek, just 2 words and an emoji. Fired equals will announce after dessert." I stared at it for 3 full seconds. Not because I was surprised, please. Derek telegraphs his punches like a toddler in a Batman costume. No, I was savoring it, committing it to memory. The exact moment the fuse hit the powder. I didn't show the text to anyone. I didn't gasp or bolt upright or drop my fork in a dramatic clatter. Instead, I locked the screen, slipped the phone back into my clutch, and took a slow sip of the fresh champagne the waiter had just poured. Then I glanced at the program folded beside my plate. There it was, tucked between Lifetime Achievement Award and closing remarks. Team tribute presented by Sloan Harper. I rose slowly, adjusted my clutch, smoothed my dress, walked toward the stage like I was headed to a piano recital and not a public execution. The crowd clapped politely, most of them too drunk or self-absorbed to register anything out of place. I stepped into the light, took the mic, and smiled at a sea of faces that had never really seen me. From the corner of my eye, I caught Derek laughing at something. Probably assumed I'd still read the script, still play the good soldier, and maybe I would have once, but not tonight. Tonight, I wasn't here to read a tribute. I was here to write the ending. I adjusted the microphone with a poise that felt eerily automatic, like muscle memory from all those years doing everyone else's talking points. A hush fell, the kind that happens just before people expect to be mildly moved and completely bored. I scanned the crowd. Sequins, Bodies, champagne flutes balanced like afterthoughts. The same people who'd smiled past me in elevators for years. Tonight, they'd listen. I began as expected. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the brilliant minds who have made this year's projects possible. I listed names, my people. Engineers who got no press coverage, designers who built the UI from scratch while Derek smoothed his hair and gave Tex-level drivel to press interns. I gave them all their flowers, one by one. I watched Derek's mouth tighten from across the room as I skipped his name. Deliberate, surgical. I paused, letting the final name hang in the air. Then I glanced down at the little cue card that was supposed to wrap my speech with inspirational unity. Instead, I slid it into my clutch and replaced it with my phone. Before we close, I said, "Eyes up, tone even, I received a message just now. May I read it to you all?" There was a soft murmur, the polite kind. Confusion wrapped in curiosity. I tapped the screen, opened the message, and held it up just long enough to let the timestamp glow like an omen. Fired equals, will announce after dessert. It echoed. The words cut the air like a scalpel, clean, cruel, irrevocable. Gasps. Someone near the front dropped their fork. Across the room, a reporter from Tech Next lowered her glass and immediately grabbed her phone. The CTO leaned forward, glasses slipping down his nose. A woman in the back muttered, "Holy shit." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just smiled, calm as a scalpel in a sterile room. I assume I said, still holding the mic like a steady hand in surgery, that this was meant for after the moose. But since we're all here and I was graciously given the stage, I thought transparency might be appropriate. Derek stood now, half out of his chair, unsure whether to sit back down or charge the stage. I watched his face cycle through disbelief, rage, panic, like a Wi-Fi signal flickering between failed connections. I continued, voice unwavering. This message wasn't surprising, but it was telling. After 12 years, after building a division from scratch, after mentoring teams and delivering growth quarter after quarter, I'm informed of my termination during dinner. By text, with an emoji. I let that word settle, emoji, like a stain spreading on white linen. I scanned the room again. More eyes were on me now than in all my years at Halcyon combined. "I came here tonight to give thanks," I said, closing the screen and sliding the phone away. And I have, but I won't leave this stage pretending the story ends with a smiley face. So let me finish with this instead. The work I've done, the real work, doesn't disappear because someone else wants credit. Innovation doesn't come from PowerPoints and PR. It comes from people who build quietly, relentlessly, often invisibly, until they decide to stop being invisible. A long silence. Derek stepped forward, mouthing something, probably security or damage control or maybe just no. Too late. I nodded once and stepped back from the mic, heartbeat steady. Every word behind me now like a match dropped into dry brush. The fire had started. For a few heartbeats, nothing moved. The ballroom held its breath like a crystal decanter on the edge of a marble countertop. One twitch, and it all shatters. The silence was rich, heavy, a vacuum after detonation. And then shhhhkk, the distinct sound of a chair sliding back, slow and deliberate, heads turned like synchronized swimmers. From the second row he stood, Martin Cleary, Halcyon's crown jewel investor, the man whose money made things happen and whose silence usually said everything. Didn't speak right away. He adjusted the cuff of his navy blazer, rumpled, old money confident, and walked toward the stage with the calm of someone who'd already decided how this would end. No rush, no drama, just inevitability. Derek froze mid-stride, mouth half open, one hand out as if he could somehow plug the hole I'd just blown in his Titanic. Martin stepped up beside me. Looked at me, not through me, not around me, but at me. Like I wasn't legacy code or redundant. Like I was the damn source. He took the mic. "Miss Harper," he said, voice low but clear enough to slice through the tension, "I came here tonight expecting to hear about Halcyon's future." He turned slightly, letting the crowd soak in the weight of each syllable. And I have. Derek took another step forward, then stopped dead. Martin continued. "We've reviewed your platform, your numbers, and most importantly, your leadership. Effective immediately. Your new venture will be fully funded." He paused, then added with a small nod by us. You could feel the room snap, like a pane of glass finally giving way. Cameras went wild. Flashes popped like paparazzi at a royal scandal. Somewhere, a champagne flute shattered against tile. Reporters elbowed toward the front of the stage. I caught one whispering into a mic. Martin Cleary Back's ex-Halcyon VP in live coupe Derek looked like he'd swallowed a mouthful of wasps. He sputtered something. "This is a mistake. She's not cleared. This isn't how we do." But no one was listening to Derek anymore. The board chair dropped her napkin like it had caught fire. The CTO leaned back, clearly recalculating every future he thought he understood. The marketing director stared into the middle distance like someone who just realized their golden boy was made of tinfoil and delusion. Martin handed the mic back to me without fanfare. No grand speech, no dig at Halcyon. Just a gesture. "We see you, we chose you." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The stage belonged to me now, not because I fought for it, but because I earned it, and someone with power finally stood up and said it out loud. Derek was frozen at the foot of the steps, one shoe awkwardly turned like he didn't know whether to run or demand a hug. I looked at him, really looked. Not with anger, not even pity, just a quiet, clinical certainty. This was his moment to realize he'd been playing checkers in a chess match. And I was already on my final move. The applause hit like a wave, polite at first, then rolling into a thunderclap of release, disbelief, maybe even joy. Some clapped out of shock, some out of solidarity. Some because they knew what they'd just witnessed. Not a speech, not a scene, but a shift, a tectonic one. I stepped down from the stage, heels silent on the carpet, mic still warm in my hand. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking back to my seat, I was walking out. Not demoted, not escorted, not ushered off stage with a PR-crafted press release. No, I was chosen. Derek lunged in behind me like a poorly trained retriever, whisper shouting my name as if we were still co-workers and not battlefield remains. "Sloan, wait, I think this has gotten out of. This isn't what you're doing is." Martin Cleary didn't even slow down. He brushed past Derek with the same indifference you'd give a kiosk worker offering cologne samples. Two other investors followed close behind, one of them already on a call, saying yes, the Harper pitch deck. Get it in front of due diligence before lunch. As I moved through the ballroom, heads turned, not away, not past me to me. Women raised their glasses. A few staffers gave discreet nods, the kind you only give to someone who finally did the thing you'd been dreaming about while staring at beige cubicle walls. The board sat frozen, half in chairs, half in shame, blinking like deer in the crash lights of a truth they'd helped ignore. The doors opened. I walked through them without looking back. By noon the next day, the headlines were biblical. Harper hijacks Halcyon Gala, with investor backing innovation coup. Derek Monroe placed on leave after live firing backfires. Cleary Group funds breakaway venture, led by ex-VP Sloan Harper tech bloggers, were calling it the slide deck decapitation. Even the Wall Street Journal ran a piece with the subhead. They sent her a smiley face. She sent them packing. Halcyon PR went into full damage control. The official statement called it a strategic personnel reshuffle that had been regrettably miscommunicated. Sure, and my dog's a senior project manager. Derek was placed on temporary leave pending internal review, which everyone knew meant we're finding a legal way to fire you without him tweeting screenshots. By nightfall, my LinkedIn was a war zone of connection requests and thinly veiled job offers. My inbox, 43 meeting invites, 3 term sheets, 1 invite to keynote at an AI summit in Zurich, all in 24 hours. I sat in my apartment, barefoot on the hardwood, dress unzipped halfway, watching the city lights buzz beyond the window like they knew. Brisket, still confused by all the extra walking this week, slept with one paw over his eyes. I uncorked a bottle of wine I'd been saving for some milestone I'd recognize when it came. I took the first sip, then opened my laptop, not to work, just to watch the numbers roll in, the faces change. The tone shift in every email from people who once couldn't remember my name. But it wasn't ego, it was peace. Because the game had never been rigged. I'd just been playing theirs, and now I was building my own. Thanks for watching, you Cubicle Warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the Coffee Pot strikes again.